Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy Devvon Terrell, and welcome to another Help Me Devvon review. And today, in this Help Me Devvon review, I'll be looking at the APOGEE Boom, which is an interface from APOGEE. Now, APOGEE was gracious enough to send me an actual interface to try out and test for myself and get my opinion on. And that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to give you my genuine opinion and tell you how I feel about the device, as well as let you make your own conclusions from this. So the way I like to test out gear, audio interfaces, etc., is to compare it to others. Because if you don't compare it to others, then really, how do you know what you're truly hearing? I can literally play you something from my iPhone, and how would you be able to really truly sit and differentiate the quality if you can't hear it next to something? So what we're going to do is we're going to take this $300 interface at the time of this recording and compare it to my $4,000 interface, which is my Preamps Sound Titan. We're also going to compare it to my Sterling Audio H224 interface, which goes for about $100 used, $150 brand new. With doing it this way, you will get a better representation of where the APOGEE Boom lands, especially with listening to those price points. Something that's $100 should not be even anywhere in the realm of something that costs $4,000 from a quality standpoint. And then we have the APOGEE Boom in the dead middle as far as being $300. So if we put the APOGEE Boom right in between those two price points as far as those audio interfaces is concerned on the opposite sides of the spectrum, we'll get a better idea of where the APOGEE actually lands. Is it a bang for your buck? Now, I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos going through the APOGEE Boom. We're going to focus on three primary things to test it. We're going to look at the build quality, we're going to test the preamps, and we're going to test the converters. Three things we're going to test. Something that I feel like most of us truly care about when it comes to these audio interfaces. So first and foremost, let's test the preamps. Okay, so now let's test the preamps of the APOGEE Boom. We're going to compare it to our really expensive interface, which is the Preamps Sound Titan, and then our cheaper interface, which is the Sterling Audio piece. Realize the only way that you're going to hear a difference or even understand what you're getting in the interface is if we compare it to other stuff, i.e. something really expensive and something extremely or just much cheaper. I'm going to play some audio files. Let me see which one you pick is which. Go ahead.
I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself. I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself. I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself. I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself. I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself. I find it odd that I'm tested, but I'm testing myself.
Now, if you picked A as the Boom, B as Sterling Audio, and C as the Preamps Sound Titan, you are correct. A was the Boom. And this is what I noticed about the preamps of the Boom. Let's compare the preamps of the Boom compared to the Sterling Audio first. First thing I noticed is that the Sterling Audio preamps sound thinner. They sound a lot smaller than the ones on the Boom. The Boom actually sounded a lot more present and just less harsh actually as well in comparison to the Sterling Audio. Now, I noticed more detail on this. And what I feel like a lot of people may have gotten themselves fooled with the Sterling Audio is that it sounded brighter and more tinny and thinner, but at the same time, it was a lot calmer in the APOGEE, and I felt like it was just a better representation of what was coming in as far as it sounding a little bit more rounder. There was a little bit more warmth in these preamps as well that I noticed, as well as a little bit more detail than that Sterling Audio, and just a better representation of the high end. Thus why I use the S's and T's phrases so much, because that's the way you can really tell a cheap interface from a very expensive one or just a better one. So in comparison to the cheap interface, these Boom preamps sounded more detailed, had a more roundness on the low end, and the top end sounded a lot better when it came to reproducing those frequencies with those S's and T's. And they overall felt bigger. Now, let's compare these preamps to the Preamps Sound preamps. Now, off rip, when I listened to the Preamps Sound preamps, I noticed a ton more detail. The second big thing I noticed was a lot more or a better representation of that low-end stuff. As soon as that Preamps Sound preamp comes on, I notice it. I can feel that difference of feeling like I'm getting a wider range of that frequency spectrum, especially in that lower mid and that low end kind of stuff. I noticed the top end felt a lot calmer as well in comparison to these, but these preamps on the APOGEE weren't bad. I was actually impressed by the way it held up. Nonetheless, when it came to the super expensive preamps of the Preamps Sound, it was unmatched when it came to the APOGEE Boom. But the Apogee Boom gave me, or did a good job of giving me kind of something that was in between, which I liked. It kind of gave me some of that roundness. It felt bigger than the Sterling Audio preamps, but also gave me somewhat of a high end that I was okay with. Now, I want you to come up with your own interpretation. You heard it for yourself. I gave you some perspective on it, and you can make the decision for yourself about the preamps of the device. But for the price, I was not mad at these preamps at all. Of course, hearing it next to the expensive, really expensive stuff, you hear a major difference. But again, for the price point, I was not mad at this at all, especially when it came to the Sterling Audio H224. That's basically a third of that price. I can see why this is more expensive. The real contrast between the Apogee Boom and the Sterling Audio is the way it's reproducing that low end or that low mid frequency, as well as how it's reproducing that high end as well, and more detail in the mid-range. Now, let's test the converters. Okay, so let's do a converter test of the Apogee Boom. And the best way that you're actually gonna hear the quality of the converters, or if they're good or not good at all, is if we compare it to something. Long story short, if I basically run something through this, run a vocal and just press play, really, you don't know if they're the best or the worst because there's nothing to really compare it to. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna compare the Apogee Boom to my $4,000 Prism Sound Titan, as well as my Sterling Audio H224, which goes for about $150, which is almost a half the price of the Apogee Boom. Through this type of test, you'll get a more clear idea of where the Apogee Boom stands up across something that is extremely expensive and then something that is even cheaper than it. When it comes to converters, or A to D, D to A, basically we're taking the acoustic energy, our mic, our guitar, whatever our sound source is, and we're converting that into a digital signal that our computers can then understand. It then takes that digital signal, D to A, and then spits it back out analog, and that process is what separates the good stuff or great stuff from the bad stuff. Long story short, every single converter interface that you have has a sound, and depending on how well it reproduces and replicates and recreates and samples that type of information into digital or to analog is a process. Some do it better than others. Cheaper ones may sound much worse than really expensive ones. All converters have a certain sonic sound and characteristic. So let's put the Apogee Boom to the test. Let's hear the sonic characteristics it has, and let's hear what it measures up against when it comes to the actual expensive stuff and some stuff that's even cheaper.
Oh no. Yeah. When I pull up, are you hopping in? Am I someone that you fucking? Are we more than friends? I just wanna do right, even if it's wrong. I need some answers, baby, please don't take too long. Okay, do you like to bring up my past when you making decisions? Remember when we started this? No, please don't let it finish. Do you really think it's better out there for you? I'm the only one that can afford you, baby.
And here are the results. If you guessed B for the Apogee Boom, you are in fact correct. Now, what was the difference that we really heard between those three pieces? Well, for starters, let's start with the digital print. In comparison to the converters used with the actual interfaces, I noticed that the digital print sounds pretty much narrow. It has a much more narrow stereo image. It wasn't as wide, felt a little lifeless, and it was feeling pretty centered. Now, with all three of the converters, I did notice a difference between them when it came to the one, stereo image, and two, clarity and detail in the actual mid-range and upper mids. What I noticed off bat with the Apogee Boom was that it actually added some of that low end that I liked. It gave it somewhat of that roundness, and it kind of gave it a little bit more of a fullness that I enjoyed. I also noticed it opened up my stereo image just a little bit. Now, in comparison, of course, to the $4,000 piece of equipment, the Prism Sound Titan, you notice a huge difference in that stereo image where it really feels like it opened it way up and it was a lot of detail. Now, the Apogee did a great job of reproducing those frequencies. I actually enjoyed the sound and tone that it gave me. It managed to sample those frequencies, convert them in a nice way that I enjoyed. The low end felt good. It still rumbled. It actually gave me a little bit more of that sound. It made me feel like it actually kind of reproduced those frequencies pretty cool. The conversion that the Apogee gave me as opposed to the straight up digital sum did sound a little bit more pleasing to my ear with this piece. I also did notice a little bit of a beef in that upper mid section where it felt like it kind of gave me just a little bit more oomph. Now, the Sterling audio piece sounded really, really bright. It felt like it added a lot of that into my signal. The one thing that I did notice about that in comparison to this is that this gave me a little bit more or a more clear stereo image. As opposed to the Sterling audio, it didn't feel as detailed as this. I also noticed off rip the low end difference between those two pieces. The Apogee gave me a warmer sound that I enjoyed and felt pleasing to my ear, especially when it came to the low end. As opposed to the Sterling audio piece, I feel like it softened my low end just a bit while boosting or just giving me a little bit more of that brightness in my upper mids and mids without giving me too much of a bigger image in my stereo field. But with this piece compared to the Sterling, I noticed and would be choosing this one over that if it came to me just picking it off of straight up converters. Now, with this compared to the Prism sound, I was really impressed. I did, of course, choose the Prism sound over it. I hope you really could tell that difference in the way it just reproduced those frequencies super accurately, and the way it just felt like the stereo image just got immensely huge and the low end was represented really, really well. But we're talking about a piece that is going right now at the time of this video for $300, and it did a nice job of reproducing that low end, giving me a little bit of a stereo image that felt a bit wider and still retaining some pretty good detail. Now, that's a detail that I've always known about Apogee's converters. They usually sound extremely sweet, very warm, and still retaining some of that brightness that I like. It always feels like this sweet brightness that these converters usually have, and I feel like I heard that characteristic within this particular converter. So with comparing these converters to expensive ones and cheaper ones, I'm actually pretty impressed of how it held up against those two converters. I had detail, a slightly more open stereo image, as well as a nice low end that still felt very warm, or better yet, added some of that. And when I say added some of that, I'm talking about the detail of that particular frequency range. Let's take a look at the build quality, some of its features, and buttons on the actual interface. So like most interfaces at this price point, I'm expecting plastic, which exactly is what it is. But at the same time, I do like the feel of it. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall apart on me so quickly. I also do like the rubberized bottom, which helps against scratching on your table or even sliding off the table so quickly and easily. I also do appreciate the buttons, which are super easy. There's literally only one, and that one button will help you switch between your N1, N2, the outputs, and etc. Of course, if you move this wheel up or down, or basically counterclockwise or clockwise, you can increase the values that way. Also, you'll notice the FX1 and FX2 indicator lights here, which is basically letting you know which channel the actual Apogee control app is using for DSP processing, which is basically built into the software. The DSP processing that you can have on N1 and N2 is a compressor and EQ, which is pretty awesome to have going right into your DAW being printed if you want to. The cables fit in pretty good. Every time I stuck a cable in, it felt sturdy. It didn't feel like it was gonna pop out. I actually struggled to get the cable out sometime, which gave me more reassurance that I wasn't gonna get something that would warp over time so quickly. I have a USB-C port here that allows me to connect to my computer, and the wire it comes with actually allows you to switch between the adapter of the USB-C and older models of USB. In the back, you have one headphone output for your headphones, obviously, and then you have a left and right channel for your speaker outputs. You have one preamp here, which is a combo, which allows for a 1/4 inch as well. And then you have a second input here for instruments and anything of that nature. Also, for later in this video, I want you guys to realize that when you stick a 1/4 inch into the preamp, you are bypassing the preamps. This is going to make sense later, but I just want you to stay or keep hold of that information as we move forward. So the only time you're actually using a preamp is when you're using the XLR. If you're using the XLR, then you're in the preamp. If you use the TRS cable or the 1/4 inch cable, you are bypassing the preamps in a device. The only that I had about the piece was when I pressed down hard on the top, I get a little bit of a space push between that and inside the interface. But that's only if you're being an extreme stickler. Other than that, I don't really have any major complaints about the build quality. For the price that it's at, I'm happy with it. Only thing I wish that was there was, I wish the headphones was in the front instead of the back. But I ironically realized, and it didn't really bother me so much when I plugged it right in and my headphones drooped right over to the side and came over. Other than that, I'm super fine with this piece and the build quality. In the APOGEE Control app, you have power and control over the boom. Basically, you can change this from mic to +4, which is line level signal. You can even obviously engage your 48 volts here, and you can print those DSP effects that I was telling you about into the signal that's coming into the DAW simply by clicking here and by tweaking these knobs, which is an EQ and a compressor right there. You can even do some cool routing things with your signals, as well as even doing a stereo link where inputs 1 and 2 comes in and it reads it as a stereo input. Pretty atypical of your digital mixers. So in conclusion, it is up to you. You heard the piece in comparison to others, and you can draw your own conclusions. I'll also leave a link in the description below to the actual audio files so you can bring this into your DAWs and listen to it for yourself. The one thing that I will take away from this is the impression that I have with the actual converters on the APOGEE. I was pretty impressed with the conversions, which is what APOGEE is so known for. Most of the time when it comes to converters, the low end is a tough place for them. Most of the time when it comes to converters, the way I can really tell a difference between cheap and expensive stuff is the low end. But the APOGEE did a nice job of reproducing those frequencies for the price that it is. So I hope you enjoyed that review. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and also make sure you follow us at HelpMeDevvon on Instagram. Also make sure that you join our Discord community with a bunch of aspiring engineers like yourself trading secrets and giving game. And also make sure you listen to the My Audio Nerds podcast every single Wednesday on Spotify and Apple as well. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and until next time, you guys.